Good morning. Just going to give it another second while we have people joining from the waiting room. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this is our penultimate session of this week-long series. So we're very, very excited to have you here and so thankful that you've all joined us throughout the week. As you know, throughout the week, we've had over 30 sessions featuring local, state, and national experts leading conversations that explore challenges, share best practices, and coalesce us around critical next steps to addressing key affordable housing issues in the state. This session is Connecticut's new opportunity map. And if you haven't had a chance to follow us on social media yet, please do. Our handle is at PSC Housing, and please join the conversation at #TippingPoint2020. Before I turn it over to our presenters, I just want to take a few moments to thank our sponsors for the series. So our leading sponsors for the series are the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority and Melville Charitable Trust. Their deep support has allowed us to have this conference this week. I additionally want to thank the collaborating sponsor, Connecticut Department of Housing, and supporting sponsors, Housing Enterprises, Inc. and Whittlesey. Lastly, our session sponsor for this session is Connecticut Housing Finance Authority. Thank you so much. Thank you. A few housekeeping items before we get going. This session is being recorded and will be made available following the series. All participants have been entered as muted. Please remain on mute unless a presenter has asked you to unmute. If you have any technology issues, please use the chat icon in your Zoom control panel and send those over to me. My name is Kaylee Pratt. You can also write at PSC Zoom meetings too, and I'll work to assist you as best I can. Your presenters will let you know how they would like any content questions to be asked throughout the session. And a few minutes before the end of the session, you'll see two polls pop up. One will be a feedback poll. Please take a few moments to help us better understand what you're looking for in future offerings. Additionally, Partnership is working to better understand the needs of our communities and affordable housing partners. We want to learn. So toward the end of the session, we will be sharing a link to a survey in the chat. Please take a few moments to share your feedback and shape both the issues that we work on and the ways that we work. I am excited to now turn it over to John Cabral. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and take it away.
Thanks. Well, welcome everyone. I want to welcome everyone to the session on opportunity mapping. Today we'll be discussing opportunity mapping as it's been used nationwide, and we'll be sharing a proposed new opportunity map that both the Department of Housing and the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority hopes to incorporate in its investments going forward. We have a pretty full slate, so I'm going to just kick it off to Erin Boggs, who will talk about opportunity mapping and the role she plays. Thank you.
Thanks for being here, everyone. I'm going to share my screen and talk a little bit about sort of how we got here with opportunity mapping. It's really just heartening to be here with CHFA and the Department of Housing at the Connecticut Fair Housing Center. We're very excited to be sharing this together, and it's also exciting to be here with Samir Gambhir, who's at the Center for Othering and Belonging at Berkeley, who's one of the people who got opportunity mapping going in the nation. For those of you who do not know Open Communities Alliance, we are a statewide organization that works to advance access to opportunity with an urban-suburban interracial coalition. We really focus on balancing where affordable housing is located as a tool for doing that. We start from a place of looking at how Connecticut compares to other places in the country in terms of segregation. And you can see from this map that Connecticut is one of the most segregated states in the country, with those dark brown orange areas being the most segregated. So we're on par with places like Detroit, Chicago, and LA. And we know a lot of the reasons for this, including what's going on with zoning, decisions around subsidized housing, placement, how housing authority jurisdictions operate, disinvestment from communities that are struggling, and a whole history of intentional policies. And that's sort of part of what brought us to opportunity mapping. We know, and this is just a little sort of touch at the history, but we know back in the mid-19th century that places like Hartford were actually quite integrated. And then we started to see all kinds of laws come into place that separated people. There was a law in the 1830s that was working to create separate but equal schools. For example, there was another law in 1833 that was trying to make sure that children of color coming from other states couldn't go to the public school system in Connecticut. We know about redlining, the government process for rating neighborhoods to see where home loans would be made and home insurance would be offered, that took the racial composition of neighborhoods very explicitly into account. And we know, based on these kinds of policies, that Hartford, that had once been diverse and integrated, by the 1960s, 94% of Greater Hartford region's low-income subsidized housing would be located inside the city limits, but the 10 surrounding towns only hosted 1.3% of that housing stock. In the 1970s, Black families still made up barely 1% of the population of the suburbs, but were a very large population of the city. Some of these factoids I'm pulling from a report that we just put out called A Steady Habit of Segregation by Susan Eaton. So I encourage you to check it out, but that's part of what's driving our interest. We sort of have to understand this problem because we have to understand where it came from. And then we have to understand the impact. So we know about the work of today, where really big data on tax returns for 10 million low-income families was analyzed to explore what happened to the families who moved to mixed-income communities. About half of the cohort and half stayed, and what Chede, who's an economist up at Harvard, found was that if the families moved before the child was age 13, that child would have a greater chance of going to college, and really high quality colleges. 30% higher income girls were 26% less likely to become single parents. And when moves happened from public housing with Section 8 to places that were lower poverty, the child's lifetime earnings were about $302,000 more than if the child had stayed. So what this tells us is not that everybody should move, but that neighborhood conditions really matter. So we need to dig into those and figure out what's going on at a neighborhood level. We also know that there's a lot of stereotypes that people have about neighborhoods based on race. And I encourage people to check out the research of Courtney Bowman, who's looked at this very closely, but there have been articles in the paper recently about how, homes owned by Black families, for example, will be appraised at lower levels, but that same notion applies to stereotypes about neighborhoods that are based on racial stereotypes. So we need to be very careful to try to pull apart where these stereotypes might come into play for how we view neighborhoods, and then reconsider how neighborhoods are getting access to resources based on who lives there during race. So we have to be able to do both of these things at the same time. And one person who has helped to get us there is John Powell, who's a professor at Berkeley at the Othering and Belonging Center. He and colleagues like Samir, who has joined us today, developed opportunity mapping. And from my perspective, it really helps as a tool to design a strategy to counteract that history of segregation, and also to allow us to pull apart stereotypes and base decisions about how we target resources on actual data about neighborhoods. One thing that I think is important to bear in mind about this mapping is that it's only as good as the values that go into it. I mean, we saw that redlining map, right? That was a map, it was rating neighborhoods, and it did really bad things. So any mapping really is only as good as the values that are behind it and the way in which it is used. So as a starting point for some principles we can think about in using this mapping, I'm just going to sort of throw out notions like the need to support disinvested communities. This can be a way to really target resources to neighborhoods that have not gotten appropriate resources on the order of other towns in the state. But we have to do it in such a manner that doesn't perpetuate poverty. So we're not just investing in, for example, subsidized housing. That's part of the mix, but it's not the only thing that should be happening. We have to work to avoid the involuntary displacement of lower income families who in Connecticut are disproportionately Black and Latino, but also understand that not all people of any particular race or income group want the same thing. That's what I have found working in Connecticut over the last 20 years, and that's true for predominantly white higher opportunity areas and for predominantly Black and Latino lower opportunity areas and all of the neighborhoods in between. And so because of that, choice is really important, honoring the choice of families, but also honoring civil rights principles like those represented in the Fair Housing Act, which really instructs us to both invest in communities that are struggling and make sure that choices are available in neighborhoods that have not offered affordable housing. We need to also use the mapping as a good tool to think about investing in cultural institutions, small businesses, and equitable revitalization, and really think of the map as a way to fill in the void, what is missing in each community. In some cases, that's going to be affordable housing or equal school funding or grocery stores or legal services. But this map can provide a tool for thinking through how to invest in those kinds of resources. And at the end of the day, of course, we want every town in Connecticut to play its own role in making this state a better state and making sure we're more equitable and offering choices to everyone. So that's my just little brief intro to how we got to think about opportunity mapping. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and hand it over to Samir Gambhir.
Thank you, Erin. Hi, everyone. Let me just quickly share my screen. Yeah, so my name is Samir Gambhir, and I lead the Equity Metrics program at the Othering and Belonging Institute at UC Berkeley. Prior to this, I used to work for the Kirwan Institute for the Study of Race and Ethnicity at The Ohio State University. Part of the program, part of the project team that was developing opportunity mapping at that time. And it was then when I met Erin for the first time. And Erin requested me to share with you my experience and understanding of the history and applications of opportunity mapping. Erin mentioned about John Powell, and it all started in 2005 when John, the then director of Kirwan Institute, was invited as an expert in a housing-related case. Baltimore public housing residents filed a case against HUD for building public housing in racially segregated and poor neighborhoods. So as part of the remedial phase, John put forth this multi-factor model that could measure opportunity across the region with the premise that a single indicator might not provide a complete picture of cumulative neighborhood disadvantage. And two, that housing choice should not be limited to the city, but be extended to the entire regional housing market. So that came to be the conceptualization of communities of opportunity, and the model was and is called the opportunity mapping. And I believe Sam is going to share the latest mapping for Connecticut after this. So at Othering and Belonging Institute, we are working on a revised version of opportunity mapping. We term it as 2.0, and thus naming the one developed at Kirwan Institute as 1.0. At Kirwan Institute, our framework was utilized in highlighting multiple policy areas, such as fair housing, education, child well-being, and target investments, to name a few. Our 2.0 framework is being used to assist California housing agencies, the Housing and Community Development, HCD, and Tax Credit Allocation Committee, TCAC, in their LIHTC QAP. It's a multi-year project to map and track opportunity for large family LIHTC projects. Let me share some of the examples of application of 1.0, and I'll share a little bit more about the California opportunity mapping at the end. So in 2009, we conducted an opportunity mapping analysis in the state of Massachusetts. The project was commissioned by Massachusetts Law Reform Institute and funded by Massachusetts Legal Assistance Corporation. And there were many successes to report on this project. One was that the analysis identified areas where the legal aid services could be provided to clients in low opportunity areas. A nonprofit affiliated with the state, it was an affordable housing entity affiliated with state, which actually committed $5 million to developing affordable rental housing in high opportunity areas. There was a target investment of $21 million in NSP dollars in low opportunity communities. Additionally, a new program, Adopt a Zip Code, was born out of this analysis. And these maps were used in litigation by National Consumer Law Center by targeting predatory businesses in low opportunity areas. In Chicago, our opportunity mapping was utilized in advising voucher holders in selecting high opportunity neighborhoods. And there were other fair housing projects from King County, Washington, to Austin, Texas, and our first opportunity map in Connecticut in 2009 or 10. We also worked with Jacksonville Children's Commission to map child well-being in Duvall County, Florida. And we used our opportunity mapping framework. We explored the geography of neighborhood and school poverty and student performance, and the impact of opportunity distribution on health and educational outcomes of children in the region. The interesting part was that we conducted a comparative analysis between opportunity in 1990 and compared that to opportunity 2009 to see how opportunity has shifted through these decades. And we found that one of the areas, I believe it was the Southwest area, we found that there was a declining opportunity over this period. So Children's Commission and Jesse Bell DuPont Fund, which funded the project, committed themselves to work towards improving opportunity in these areas. Another interesting application was to assist student enrollment plan in Montclair School District. We created 3 zones using our opportunity framework, and the school district implemented a plan. It was an enrollment plan for each elementary school to have equal representation from each zone. I believe the plan is still in place. Diversity Data Kits project, it's a joint project and it's an ongoing project between Kirwan Institute and Brandeis University. They are tracking opportunity and child well-being in largest 100 metros in the US. And this started in 2014, and they use multiple indicators. And I'm sure you can check out the opportunity in various metros within Connecticut as well. Another interesting area of application is target investment. We analyze projects funded by American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, or ARA, in 4 metros in Florida in 2009, 2010, as part of the jobs bill after the Great Recession. The project was in collaboration with Miami Workers Center and Research Institute on Social and Economic Policy at Florida International University. We geocoded or geolocated each ARA project within these 4 metros and analyzed those against the opportunity mapping. In California, we were part of the peer review committee for the Regional Opportunity Index being developed by UC Davis. This mapping was developed to assist in statewide microlending and guide investment by Rabobank and other organizations under CRA. We shared our expertise and helped UC Davis build this application. Now, applications of 2.2 at Othering and Belonging Institute. But there's a bit of a story behind this. So the State Department of Housing and Community Development approached us to analyze their large family lighted developments against the Regional Opportunity Index developed by UC Davis. And like many other states, we found that most of the large family projects were concentrated in low opportunity areas. This led, so we prepared a report for that, and this led the California HCD and TCAC to create a fair housing task force to assist them in restructuring their affordable housing program. They wanted us to identify indicators that were linked to opportunity and upward mobility and subsequently build an opportunity model. The task force included California Housing Partnership Corporation, Turner Center at UC Berkeley, and us, and briefly the enterprise community partners as well. We produced an interactive map based on this work. And you can view some very interesting features if you go to this website. Considering that, and some of the features were that considering that California is a large state with a lot of variation in labor and housing market, each census tract was analyzed against its own TCAC region. And the other interesting feature was that there was a separate analysis for the rural areas. This is our 3rd year working with them, producing an annual update since 2018. We are currently working on the 2021 index, and I believe the public release would be in early next year. And HCD and TCAC has used these maps to devise policy to incentivize lighted development in high opportunity areas. The data from the past 3 years, and though it's a very short period for housing development, has already shown some encouraging results. We've seen some improvement in percentage of affordable housing development in these areas, in high opportunity especially, and the work is ongoing. Last but not the least is our TCAC mapping, or the framework is being used in different policy areas, mainly fair housing areas within the state. We used our methodology with fewer indicators to identify job rich and high opportunity areas that could potentially be upzoned. So the Housing Bill SB 50 that was presented had upzoning as a main feature to improve housing production. Turner Center and Urban Footprint used those designations, opportunity designations, to analyze production of housing for different housing bills that came about, SB 50 and AB 3040. And Southern California Association of Governments, SCAG, a metropolitan planning organization, used those designations for their regional housing needs assessment, a statewide program. I've actually put in a lot of information in this, but I'll leave you with this and I'll pass it on to Sam for presenting his slides.
Thank you so much, Samir. Let me just share my screen. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm going to talk a bit about what goes into the opportunity methodology and the changes we've made for the latest iteration. You're looking at the previous DOH methodology, which has been in use and importantly was the basis for a lot of the research that OCA has done over the years on access to opportunity, subsidized housing, and racial segregation. Sorry, I'm trying to, there you go. So the previous methodology incorporated 11 opportunity factors, all weighted equally. And each factor sort of has its own impact on the pathway that low-income families could have towards opportunity. Everything from schools to neighborhood factors such as poverty rate, to job factors, crime, vacancy, public assistance, etc. However, we had a few concerns about the previous DOH methodology. Importantly, equally weighting all of the opportunity factors from each different data set could skew the data and could actually make certain factors more important than others in terms of their total impact on the final outcome of the opportunity level for any given census tract. So I believe the previous methodology had 5 indicators that were related to job access, which meant that of the 11 factors, that jobs represented nearly half of what opportunity meant for any given census tract. And that could certainly something that we wanted to address. There's also just the need to regularly update the data that is used. Some of this data was, from ACS, maybe only a few years back. Some of it was even older. So we wanted to make sure we're using the most up-to-date, publicly available and vetted data by the state or federal government. And then a final concern was that we overly relied on American Community Survey data, which for small geographies such as census tracts can tend to have high margins of error. So for example, if a census tract only has a few thousand residents and very few of those residents are living below the poverty line, then the margin of error for that census tract in terms of the population below the poverty level can be very high. So those are some of the concerns we wanted to address in recreating the opportunity map. And we did that in 3 ways. Probably the most impactful way was to equalize the impact of 3 different pathways towards opportunity. So educational factors, employment factors, and neighborhood factors, respectively, are all equalized in terms of their impact on the final opportunity index for any given census tract. In order to deal with that margins of error issue, we limited the number of American Community Survey variables and limited them to 1 per domain. And then, of course, we updated to the most recent available data. So you can see the 3 pathways. We reduced the number of overall variables to 9. In education, we're using the State Department of Education data on school performance from EdSite, known as the Next Generation Accountability Index. We also use median income, which is a proxy for how much resources are devoted to schools and ties closely to school performance. In the employment domain, we use 4 variables. 2 of them are from the HUD Locational Affordability Index, which is published, I think, based on 2016 American Community Survey data, and is a measurement of how many jobs any given census tract has access to using an inverse gravity model. So jobs in an adjacent census tract are given a high weight for that census tract, and then jobs that are 50 miles away are still counted, but at an exponentially smaller rate. We also used job growth data from the State Department of Labor, quarterly census of earnings and wages. And this is, again, at the town level, but the town job growth was distributed to each census tract in that town. And then the ACS variable, unemployment, which is very useful as an indicator of how much competition new job seekers would face were they to move to this neighborhood. And then finally, the neighborhood domain includes the data on crime rate from the State Department of Public Safety, as well as homeownership and poverty rate from the ACS. So the data that we updated, some of it was just maybe a year in difference. So all the ACS variables went from the 2017 5-year estimates to 2018. The HUD location affordability index moved from 2014 data to 2016. And so this is just to show you how it behooves us to update this periodically as some of these new data sets are published by either state agencies or federal agencies. We also incorporated median income, which wasn't in the previous iteration because of its usefulness, not only in its obvious connection to opportunity, but a good proxy for education and the research. In order to reduce margins of error, we used a decennial census variable for homeownership, and this may seem outdated because it's using the 2010 decennial, and this can be easily updated, assuming we have an accurate census publication for 2020. And then the previous job variable, job diversity in the last iteration wasn't actually reproduced in the location affordability index by HUD in the latest version. And so we used retail job access as a proxy for the availability of jobs with low educational attainment requirements. I think the biggest impact you'll see in the difference between the previous iteration and the current map is due to domains. Using domains, it increases the importance of school factors and poverty and crime as well. And as I mentioned, decrease in importance of job factors, because in the previous iteration, 5 out of 11 factors were related to employment access. And so they were overweighted, I would argue, in the previous version. So you can see the impact is not tremendously noticeable. Overall, the map looks quite similar, and I'll show you a little bit more about the exact changes that occurred. So since the opportunity is measured in quintiles, so at the 20th, 40th, 60th, and 80th percentile of opportunity, once all of the metrics are averaged, you can see the change in opportunity level was not great or not substantial. The vast majority of tracks did not change or changed only by 1 level. And since we're measuring them at that percentile, there can be crossing of that percentile limit, even though the opportunity index doesn't change greatly. Less than 20 tracks changed 2 levels, and only 3 tracks changed 3 levels. And I think, obviously to validate these results, we wanted to go and look at the tracks that changed significantly. And of course, some of the changes will be due to actual changes in the community. The data will be different because there have been changes in these census tracts. But if a tract changed 3 levels, we wanted to take a closer look. And so those 3 tracts, one tract, which I think comprises the entire town of Hampton, Connecticut, was previously rated low opportunity and now is shown to be very high. And you can see some of the statistics for Hampton: low poverty rate, low unemployment, high home ownership, moderate median income, no crime, no violent crime, according to state data. I think really the change here was that the sheer number of jobs was very heavily weighted in the previous iteration. And now that we have sort of balanced jobs as only 1/3 of the overall opportunity equation, those other metrics indicate higher opportunity. And then 2 tracks that decreased from very high to low opportunity were in New Haven. And, above average poverty rate, a high violent crime rate, but also very high job access. I think you can see the impact of a reduction in the importance of jobs in these changes. But I think the most significant change here for New Haven is the town-wide school performance metrics. So the school district for New Haven performed very low in the Next Generation Accountability Index. And since school performance was weighted more highly in this newer iteration, that I think decreased, that explains most of the decrease there. And with that, I will stop sharing and turn it over to John and Mike.
Thanks, everybody. Mike Santoro, Department of Housing, for those of you who don't know. I really don't have a lot more to add other than to simply say that we are very thankful for the work that Open Communities Alliance and the Connecticut Fair Housing Center jointly did, as well as all the assistance they gathered to get this new opportunity mapping in place. We look forward to implementing the opportunity mapping as a tool in the decision-making process for our funding opportunities. For those of you who don't know, we have modified our methodology for distributing funds. We've moved to what's called the development engagement process. Information is available at the department's website on that process. But in short, we are identifying projects that have high opportunity benefits, are ready to move forward with their financial opportunities and get their projects underway as quickly as possible. We currently have about 91 projects statewide under construction right now. And very shortly we'll be announcing some additional awards along those lines to keep that construction progress moving. We thank you all for your participation and interest in opportunity mapping overall. And we believe it's a valuable tool to help the department and the state of Connecticut move progress in addressing these long-standing segregation-related issues. Jonathan.
Thanks, Mike. So I would be remiss, and I didn't say this earlier, but I want to thank the partnership for hosting us. I think this is a great opportunity. I think this has been a great week of different sessions. I can't thank the partnership and the staff there and the whole team enough for this week. It's been awesome. I also want to thank the presenters so far. I mean, Sam, Samir, Mike, Erin, you've all been excellent. I think this is a really cool session. Erin Kemple will have some closing remarks, but I just wanted to take a moment just to talk about how CHFA may utilize this map going forward. So for many of you who probably already know, CHFA has been using opportunity mapping for a number of years that has been different than the one that the Department of Housing has been using. The current opportunity map that CHFA uses is for its 9% round. And it's really based on these municipal level data rather than census tract data. And that was a decision that was made at the time from feedback we had received. Because here in Connecticut, we really do talk about towns. There's 169 little fiefdoms, and we sort of decided to try to really to match our opportunity mapping with that. However, obviously there's issues with that. Each community has different neighborhoods. Those neighborhoods have different realities. And so moving to a census tract level actually makes a lot of sense. I think it's a great idea when we talk about opportunity mapping. So that's one significant difference between CHFA's current map and the proposed new map. CHFA's map is binary. So we compare towns on whether how they rate compared to the state average. So it's either yes or no. You get points if you're above average compared to state or below. And it's pretty straightforward. It was simple. I think at the time we tried to make it as simple as possible. But again, there's issues with going in that direction. So we've decided that it makes sense to adopt something that may make more sense at the ground level. And then we also use different measures. So our points, our opportunity mapping is based on a different group of criteria, although very similar to DOH's current map and the proposed map that Sam presented. But up until, currently our map gives points if the town is non-exempt. We look at school performance using the Great Schools methodology, which is which is used by other sources such as Zillow when you're looking to purchase a home. However, the data is a bit stale and doesn't really drill down to, it's pretty high level. And so I think the stuff that's being used in the current map, the new map is a little bit, goes a little more in depth, and I think it makes more sense. We look at poverty level in a community, the jobs to population ratio, how many jobs there are to the number of folks residing in that community, which really doesn't go into, it really doesn't speak to what's actually happening at the ground level. There are plenty of communities where you may have lots of jobs, but those jobs aren't necessarily the jobs that folks who may be residing in our developments have access to. And proximity to community college, we thought that was important as an opportunity for adults in the household to grow. So with that being said, we decided, and again, getting feedback from folks in the development community, it made sense that rather than having two different maps, that we would follow DOH's lead and adopt what they would be using for future rounds. And I just wanted to take a moment just to sort of compare the current map with the proposed map that Sam shared. And again, just showed a snippet. Here's some towns around the city of Hartford. And as you can see above, that points are based on the town level, whereas the proposed map, and actually even the current DOH map, is based on the census tract level. And there's going to be some shifts. But at the end of the day, I think although there were changes, there are a lot of similarities between all these maps. And again, depending on the way you slice and dice it, you'll have different. You may have different scores, but again, I think the new map and the map that DOH currently uses just makes more sense at the community level. CHFA will plans to incorporate what DOH plans to approve for a future round, not for the next 9% round, but for a future round after that. It still has to go through our QAP task force and be approved by our board. But again, it makes sense to have one statewide map that I think reduces confusion and meets the need of what's actually happening in the community. So with that, I want to thank everyone on the team for putting the map together and working with us. And it's been a learning experience for me, and it's been awesome. So with that being said, I think I'm going to kick it off to Erin Kemple for some closing remarks.
Thank you, and thank you everyone who came before me. I don't have a PowerPoint because, as Jonathan indicated, I'm really just batting cleanup here. But I did want to start with history. Erin Boggs talked a little bit about the history of the fair, how we got to be so segregated. And one of the things that the Fair Housing Act, which was first passed in 1988, tried to do was to really address the issue of integration, as well as stop individual acts of discrimination, as well as change policies and practices that were within federal, state, and local governments that were creating the segregation. When Senator Walter Mondale was talking about the history of the Fair Housing Act when we celebrated the 50th anniversary 2 years ago, he and I think everyone else was very clear that we may have done a good job of addressing individual acts of discrimination, but we have not done as good a job on promoting integration. And I think that's the point of this session here today, is that this is not about individual acts of discrimination by real estate agents, by landlords, by lenders. What this is really about is changing the way that our state looks at the map of the state and the things it can do to promote integration. And so that's one of the reasons why when you look at the point system, or you look at the publications around the competition for funding, you're going to see that there is a greater emphasis on moving people into areas where there is no low-income housing, where there are no people of color. And because of the crossover between people who are low income and people who need affordable housing and race, one of the things that ensuring that there is affordable housing throughout the state of Connecticut will promote integration. Having said that, and this is really my last point, because I think we do want to get to some questions or some comments from people in the audience. One of the things that we have noticed is that when there is an emphasis on putting housing in areas that affordable housing in areas that have very little affordable housing, sometimes it does not help people living in our urban areas. For instance, in the city of Hartford, there was a lot of development in downtown Hartford of high-end housing that had a lot of amenities that people were looking for at the time, things like gyms and parking and walkability to various services and restaurants. And when the city of Hartford started its plan back in 2014, it promised that every single new development in downtown Hartford would have affordable housing. That didn't happen. In fact, only about 6% of the new housing that was created was affordable to people who were low or very low income. And part of the reason for that is that people were not able to, the developers were not able to access enough funding in order to make those units anything other than market rate units. And what has happened is that the people who have lived in Hartford for a long period of time and that have lived in Hartford for a long period of time, who would like to take advantage of the development and the gentrification that's happening in Hartford, have been unable to do that. And that's why I really appreciate Erin Boggs' final point, which is we're looking at a both and approach with the opportunity mapping. We're not just looking at let's have a policy where we move all of the affordable housing to the suburbs, although that's not a terrible idea, but that we are looking at also investing in the cities. And I think that's one of the reasons why looking at the census tract in order to determine where to give points or develop affordable housing is so important, because what it means is that we are not putting affordable housing under a highway overpass in a town that is nominally high opportunity, but we're actually integrating people into all of the communities throughout the state of Connecticut. And Erin Boggs texted me that I said the Fair Housing Act passed in 1988, but in fact, she is correct. It was 1968 with the Fair Housing Amendments Act passing in 1988. And with that, I will let people either ask questions or make comments, because I'm interested in hearing. There's been a lot of people on this, and I recognize a lot of the names from both the affordable housing context as well as developers, and I'm interested in hearing their feedback. Thank you.
All right, I think Kaylee, yep.
Sure, John, I just wasn't sure if you wanted me to go ahead. Yeah. So the presenters have requested that anyone who has questions to please put them in the chat. So if there are any questions, please share them. There's a couple that have come in about just the presenter sharing slides. It was noted that we're going to make all of the recordings for the conference available as soon as possible. And then any presentations that we have permission to share, we will go ahead and post on our website. So I just want to let everyone know that. And it was asked if the opportunity map is currently posted on the DOH website.
And I can take that one, and no, because I haven't gotten it yet. So as soon as Erin gives it to me, it will get posted on the department's website. So this is really the first opportunity to roll it out. And it wouldn't have made sense to put it up until we did something like this to actually get it out there for people to get a flavor of. But not kidding, when Erin and the team send the link to us, we will get that new opportunity mapping up at the department's website. So
the link is, it's on our website. And so I provided the link in the chat, and yes, Mike, we can talk about how to get it to you and get it up.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Erin and Mike. A question came in about asking for Sam to discuss the 2 employment variables one more time, including what geography they are measured.
Sure. Maybe I'll share my screen again. And I should just say that I'm happy to answer any other questions via email. I'll drop my email in the chat. So there are actually 4 employment variables. 2 of them come from the HUD location.
Sorry. Sam, it's just showing it's just showing, oh, there you go. You're good. Yep.
Cool. You can see the slide with the domains.
Yes.
Great. So the 4 employment variables, 2 come from the HUD Location Affordability Index, which is a tool that HUD uses to assess how affordable a census tract is. Those variables use an inverse gravity model, which basically means that all the jobs in that census tract and are weighted highly to contribute to the number of jobs accessible to that census tract. Then all the jobs in adjacent census tracts right around them are included, but weighted less highly. And that extends ad infinitum. So that, you know, a job 100 miles away doesn't actually have a meaningful impact on it because it's 0.0000001% of the job model. So those 2, just jobs in general and retail jobs, are both using an inverse gravity model. Then we use the State Department of Labor data simply to look at the change in employment between 2016 and 2019, and that's a town-wide variable that's published at the state. Basically, it's the percentage change over time in the last 3 years of data that's available. And then finally, unemployment is simply from the ACS, and unemployment basically, the logic behind it is that a higher unemployment rate in a census tract is going to mean more competition for the types of jobs that low-income families may be trying to access when they move. And I'll drop my email in the chat. So if people, I know we have limited time.
Thank you, Sam. Are you working with other agencies to address the other elements of high opportunity, education, labor, et cetera? And I think that's for the group.
Mike unmuted first, so.
Sure. All right, I'll go first. Short answer, Helen, is yes, we're looking at leveraging our investments at the state level across state agencies. We have a variety of our interagency working groups working on that particular issue. The most common one, I think everybody talks about and hears about, is TOD, Transit-Oriented Development. Helen, you participated a number of years ago in the original task force that's been restarted. We started meeting a month and a half ago, John,
yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. We're also actively engaging the Department of Education in a new initiative to attempt to tie some of our investment to where they are seeing educational opportunities grow. Those will be forthcoming. Most of those would have already been implemented and be moving down the road, if not for the current circumstances and engulfing the world at the moment, and in particular engulfing the United States. I think once things settle down, you'll start to see some of those initiatives blossom again. But yes, all of that is in the works.
Yeah, and I'll just say, you know, for CHFA, we just embarked and finalized the completion of our strategic plan. We're rolling that out, and as part of that, we understood and got a lot of feedback that you know, CHFA really wants to be more interactive and more and work with actually work at the municipal level. So the hope is that we will be able to work with not only our nonprofit partners and other state agencies, but also have a stronger relationship with communities. I know for the last couple of years, we've worked with the American Planning Association to get a better sense in what's happening in some communities. And I think that's going to move forward and grow as we roll out the strategic plan. So for sure.
Great, thank you. Alex Knopp has made the note that the idea of a single unified opportunity mapping set of variables or definitions seems desirable. Are there differences between the two approaches, towns and census block tracts, so significant that a compromise can't be met?
So I'll speak to this. So the reality is when you compare most towns to the census tract level, using the methodology that Sam presented, there shouldn't be any real surprises. I mean, I think most higher opportunity towns will have higher opportunity census tracts. There are exceptions to that, and we probably can easily name some sections of certain towns that probably would score lower compared to the rest of the town. So there will be changes, and there will be census tracts that will score higher and lower because of the new methodology. But I think when you look at community development as a whole and how you want to really have impact on a neighborhood, the census tract level just, I think, makes a lot more sense than the town level. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what kind of projects we will see going forward.
I just wanted to add to that in the town of Darien, a couple of probably more than a year ago now, there was a proposal to put housing for people with disabilities in the town and in the downtown area, and the developer was told that that was a requirement in this high-end development he was doing in the downtown area. He was allowed to either buy his way out of doing that because of inclusionary zoning in the town of Darien, or to just propose a different place to put the affordable units. And in this case, the proposal was to put the affordable units on an off-ramp between the off-ramp and the highway. I think it was 95. Now, obviously, it was still in the town of Darien, so it was still in a high opportunity town, but it was certainly not a high opportunity census tract in that area. And that's exactly what this new opportunity map is trying to oppose. To also go back to the cities, while if you look at the entire map of the city of Hartford, it's colored as very low opportunity, but we also know that that's not exactly true, that there are parts of Hartford that are higher in opportunity. There are parts of Hartford that, like the downtown area, that is probably moving up from low opportunity to moderate opportunity, and we want to take advantage of those situations also.
John, I'm not seeing any additional questions in the chat. I don't know if we have another minute or two, if anyone has any last minute questions, or if anyone has last minute comments from the presenters.
So I'll just quickly say that for CHFA, again, our process is that we have a QAP task force. We hope to incorporate a new map, probably not in the next round, but the round after that, because the QAP is now out, will be out for public comment. But we want to give the development community plenty of time to really understand the opportunity map and future deals. So it still has to go through our QAP task force. It will go to the board, but we're way ahead of the game, again, just to get an idea of, we just want to get it out there so folks aren't surprised and you can start putting good deals together. So, and I want to thank everybody. This has been awesome. For me, this has been a learning experience as someone who's worked in housing for years and is a student of sort of urban planning. So Samir, Sam, Erin, Mike, thanks again. Really appreciate your time and look forward to working with you guys in person next year, hopefully. All right, so are we good?
Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much for joining.
Have a great day.
Thanks for going. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.